This video was made in response to a commenter who asked me to talk about dreams. So I guess it would be good to start with the different states. Apart from deep sleep, at any given time, there is the perception of either the phenomenal world, and by that I mean the waking world, or the dream world. So those are three of the states. The perceiving of the phenomenal world in waking, when done through the lens of identity with the believing of the body and the mind as self, that's one of the states. There's a fourth state, though, and that is the viewing of the phenomenal world apart from the lens of identity and belief that one is the body. That's the fourth state, essentially bringing that which witnesses the dream into the waking world. So both the dreaming world and the waking world are perceived as qualia. As the perception of reality in waking, it's the projection of the mind based on sense data. And the perception of the dream is a projection of the mind based on memory. What I say here is based on experience and not books or studies, just what I've experienced in dreams, about dreams. And that is that dreams are derivative. My experience is that they're derivative. Everything that appears in my dreams is typically something that has a counterpart in the real world. It's thus an impression in consciousness born of experience. If it's not a specific object, then it's something from a category of known objects. Back when I used to watch TV and was subject to the typical level of obsessive thinking, my dreams would mostly be a rehash of what I experienced during the day. Like there would be specific commercials that could appear in my dreams, or shows, or video games. The commenter who inspired this video asked if I thought dreams were glimpses into alternate realities or afterlives, or the afterlife. But because dreams seem to be almost wholly derivative, I'd say they're more like a pocket dimension, a bubble whose inner surface is comprised of the impressions in consciousness born of your experiences during the day. But I do think dreaming relates to the afterlife. Various spiritual traditions and systems relate dreaming to the afterlife. For example, the dreaming path in Castaneda's description of the Yaqui way of knowledge, it's essentially astral projection through lucid dreaming. Another place you would see such is the navigation of the Bardo state after physical death. The ability to have more vivid and lucid dreams is a byproduct, and for some, a major goal of spiritual practice. If you set aside entity worship, spiritual practice is fundamentally energy conservation and transmutation. And that's the stuff of dreams. That energy has different names, like prana, lush, chi, etc., as well as various different roles to play in a being, like thinking, digesting, moving muscles, sexual function. This energy works to all these different ends. We are energetic beings. I noticed a big change in my dream life when I began to address unwanted thoughts in an effective way. Most of the videos on my channels contain some discussion of dealing with unwanted thoughts and the consequences of being effective at it. So I may keep this part brief, but maybe I won't. What I surmise about my energetic consumption prior to spiritual practice was that most of my energy was being eaten up in pointless rumination, redundant thoughts that began and ended with themselves, bearing no fruit in the real world other than a kind of exhaustion that's not correctly attributed to its cause. I can think of three factors that enhance one's study of dreaming: energy conservation, self-knowledge, and the discipline to create the ideal conditions for lucid dreaming. The lowest hanging fruit in terms of energy conservation is to not waste it on pointless, uncontrolled rumination. Sexual energy conservation, brahmacharya, is another lever to pull. But I found that it's not necessary for lucid dreaming, that it's much more the uncontrolled thought loop that consumes energy than the sexual expression. And truly, if you can deal with that, the conservation of sexual energy will follow naturally, as so much of that expenditure is driven by sexual fantasy, which is born of a lack of presence. Your conservation of energy will be the product of your presence, your ability to be in the moment. Presence is essentially a walking meditation, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, as to simply be present by willpower is not a sustainable thing. There are many other supporting practices behind presence, things that support an abiding presence, such as the modality of surrender, mindfulness, and self-inquiry. I've covered these before, but a quick summary of how they work together would be that in each moment you have the mindfulness to notice when unwanted thoughts are arising. At first, the thoughts have the ability to trigger emotions, because while still in body identification, there is belief in being the vulnerable one to which those thoughts relate. The normal mode of dealing with thoughts from unconscious body identification is to countervail them with other thoughts, to come up with plans and contingencies to address the fears that those thoughts represent. But that doesn't work, as it causes more thoughts, proliferation. If one is still in the condition of being emotionally triggered by thoughts, then the modality of surrender is the starting point. And this is to engage not the content of the troubling thought, but rather the feeling that underlies it. While the content is relational, causing proliferation, the feelings are not. They would be like meaningless sounds versus meaningful words. So to give one's attention fully to the feeling rather than the thought, given attention's zero-sum nature, precludes the proliferation of chatter on the subject of whatever it is that triggers. There's just a feeling fully, without resistance or reaction, and a letting go, the giving over of that feeling, the surrendering of it to a higher power. In this, the energy that underlies that thought complex is dissipated, and the thought complex itself begins to deflate like a balloon. And in this deflation, there is perceived a space between these thoughts, the skin of that balloon, and the energies, and what's aware of them. There's this space between these things and what's aware of them as the thought complex deflates, as the energy drains away in surrender. In realizing this gap is discovered the non-self nature of what is perceived, and the fact that the awareness you are is nothing that can be perceived within awareness. In this lack of fear, it works towards equanimity, a lack of being triggered by what appears. This brings about a massive conservation of energy. From there, thoughts are viewed impersonally. There's a realization of the impossibility of being anything appearing in the awareness one is. There's no sense of being anything to which these thoughts could relate. What relates to the thoughts is this thing called I, which is also a thought appearing in the awareness one is, and as such, there's no delusion of being that. Self-inquiry is the ongoing questioning of the nature of I through the phrase or question, who am I? As Ramana Maharshi asked. In this realization, thoughts are seen as objects, but gone is the perception of being the subject to which they relate. In this is the stillness of a broken machine, where the power transfer between the thought I and its appendages is broken between it and the energy body. There's no power transfer between thoughts and the energy body. Self-inquiry breaks the connection of the energy body from the false self, leaving the former undisturbed and unconsumed by the treadmill on which the mind typically holds it. This energy conservation leaves a lot more energy available for the generation of dreams, and thus the dreams become more vivid. Additionally, the ongoing abidance as independent awareness in the waking world allows for a greater consistency of experience between waking and dreaming, as the dreamer views the mind as a world from the perspective of independent awareness, and not as the lens that colors it. What I'm saying is that you typically feel good in a dream because in viewing the mind as a world instead of a lens through which it's distorted, there's no layer of distortion between it and what perceives it. That is to say, you are enlightened when you're dreaming, but you don't remember it. But to bring that contented awareness into the waking world is the product of spiritual practice. People like Ramana Maharshi know themselves the same way, be they awake or in a dream. They are always lucid. This ability to maintain the witness in these different states of being is reported to be of advantage in the Bardo state after death, and this is covered in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. A couple of other things I'll say about lucid dreaming is that when you have cultivated this state in yourself where you have the energy and presence to do it, there are techniques that increase your chances of becoming lucid in the dream. But it takes this certain discipline, like getting up early in the morning to go fishing. The vividness of your dream is enhanced by energy conservation, which does increase your chances of being lucid, as the dreams are so real. But in my experience, if you have gotten to where you can perceive the energy body and it has ascended and stabilized in the spiritual heart, your best chance of having a lucid dream would be just after going to bed from waking up to meditate at 3 a.m. So you wake up, say at 3 a.m., meditate, then go back to bed. In that meditation, you raise your prana, and there's a very good chance you'll have a lucid dream, or a very vivid dream that turns into a lucid dream. I found that an ongoing questioning of whether or not I'm experiencing a dream, whether or not I'm experiencing a dream during the day, can bring that dialogue into the dream. So the question is this a dream? And you just ask that all during the day. And then if that dialogue carries into your dream, you may notice. But while questioning whether or not one is in a dream, if the dream is occurring in the same setting as waking, which it often does, like, for example, you wake up in a dream in the same place where you laid down, like your bedroom, and then say you get up and go to your bathroom and you look in the mirror and you see something unexpected, it may cause you to realize that you're in a dream. Like on 3 occasions, like once I was in a dream, I looked in a mirror and there was nothing there, and I realized I was in a dream. And then in another time, I looked in the mirror and there was somebody else in the mirror, and I realized I was in a dream. And another time, I went in my bathroom, and instead of there being a toilet, there's just a hole in the floor. I realized I was in a dream. So I think that's about all I have to say on the topic, just to throw this together. And I'll add that in my experience, regardless of how energetically efficient and ascended you are, if you smoke cannabis, it blacks out your dreams. That's just my experience. There's no vivid dreaming. That cannabis shuts that all down, at least in my experience. So that's all for now.